A Facebook feed snaps into place, crisp and familiar. An Amazon product card stacking itself with mechanical precision. A government benefits portal. A startup's demo page pitched to investors. Every screen looks different. Every screen feels different. Yet beneath all of them runs the same invisible skeleton. The one you never think about. The one you've touched 1,000 times without knowing its name. Developers know this feeling intimately. You craft interfaces, push pixels, chase deadlines. You've probably copied a Bootstrap snippet at 2 a.m. and never wondered who wrote the original. Non-technical viewers live inside it too. Every search bar, every login box, every grid of neatly arranged content reflects decisions you never saw, rules you never learned, architecture you never questioned. But here's the twist. Beneath those clean, confident surfaces lies a story filled with conflict, burnout, quiet panic, and a rebellion inside Twitter HQ that almost didn't happen. The web wasn't streamlined. It was cracking. It was chaotic. It was costing companies millions. A 2011 Twitter engineer once spent 19 hours building a layout that broke on every screen size. A startup lost $42,000 when its front end collapsed under load. A government agency in 2023 skipped 2 years of redesign because Bootstrap gave them instant order. Bootstrap didn't just standardize the web. It redistributed power. It changed who gets to build. It emerged not as a grand vision, but as a desperate attempt to stop a company from collapsing under its own internal chaos. And this journey, from an internal Hack Week tool to a global standard, begins in a cramped office where 2 exhausted engineers decide something has to give. Chapter 1. 2 engineers against the chaos. What if the web you know today was born from a single room full of mismatched buttons? What if the framework powering millions of sites began as a quiet act of defiance inside Twitter? Rewind to July 2010. Twitter HQ on Folsom Street sits above a coffee shop that never closes. Upstairs, fluorescent lights hum over a battlefield of clashing design languages. One page uses pill-shaped buttons. Another prefers sharp-edged rectangles. A third invents its own shade of blue because one engineer liked it better. 6 different button shapes. 7 competing CSS files. 0 coherence. Every launch feels like rolling dice. In the middle of this chaos stands Mark Otto, a soft-spoken hybrid designer-engineer with a habit of sketching interface ideas on diner napkins at 2 a.m. Mark obsesses over clarity. He collects patterns. He believes consistency is oxygen. Across the room sits Jacob Thornton, sharp-witted, allergic to authority, driven by a conviction that Twitter's UI debt will crush the company if nobody intervenes. He joined Twitter to fix things. Instead, he walked into a digital Frankenstein stitched together from every engineer's personal preferences. Outages cost Twitter an estimated $7 million in 2010. As the fail whale became a global punchline, users fled. Advertisers hesitated. And inside the building, no 2 teams could ship a page that looked like it belonged to the same product. One night, exhausted and frustrated, Mark and Jacob make a choice. They start building a shared internal toolkit. They call it Twitter Blueprint. It feels like discovering a city where every neighborhood uses different traffic laws and deciding to standardize the lights. But inside Twitter, their spark doesn't ignite celebration. It ignites resistance. Chapter 2. Battling Twitter's culture. No one at Twitter wanted Bootstrap at first. That's the surprising truth. The framework that would reshape the web began as an internal project almost everyone tried to kill. Inside Twitter's engineering culture, autonomy wasn't just encouraged. It was sacred. Kelly Ellis, an engineer who later spoke publicly about those years, described it as every team building their own mini-nation. Each nation had its own laws, its own CSS, its own identity. And no one wanted to surrender sovereignty to a shared system built by 2 mid-level engineers. Blueprint threatened pride. It threatened ownership. It threatened the unwritten rule that engineers build their own tools, even if those tools break. The resistance arrives fast. One manager sends a rejection email that slices cleanly. We don't want another layer of abstraction slowing us down. Another warns that standardization will discourage creativity. Engineers whisper that Blueprint makes them look like junior devs. Meetings turn tense. Eyes roll. The message is clear. Don't touch their CSS. Blueprint sits on the brink of quiet death until Hack Week. Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton gamble everything on a last-minute demo. In a crowded room, they pull up 2 pages. One built the old way, one built with Blueprint. Build time drops by 60%. 3,200 lines of duplicate CSS vanish. The room shifts. Suspicion becomes curiosity. Curiosity becomes pressure. Blueprint wins, but with strings attached. It can exist only as an experiment, a side project, a maybe. Mark and Jacob nod, accept the compromise, and then do something no one expects. They decide to release it to the world. Chapter 3. How Bootstrap escaped Twitter. Remember that Hack Week victory? The one that turned Blueprint from a fringe experiment into a tolerated internal tool? That win gave Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton something far more dangerous than approval. It gave them momentum. And momentum has a way of slipping past boundaries. Inside Twitter, Blueprint remains unofficial, experimental, almost fragile. But outside Twitter, an entirely different world is starving for consistency. Developers fight CSS quirks alone. Startups burn money on redesigns. Agencies chase deadlines with duct-taped UI kits. Mark sees it, Jacob feels it. The gap between what Twitter builds privately and what the world struggles with publicly grows impossible to ignore. So they make a decision that will reshape the internet. Open source it. The move isn't heroic. It's frustrated. Twitter's internal politics slow development to a crawl. Mark and Jacob believe design consistency should be a public good, not a guarded corporate experiment. They draft a proposal, expecting a fight. Instead, leadership signs off, almost casually. No one realizes what's coming. August 19th, 2011. GitHub. No marketing, no press. Just a quiet repository named Bootstrap. It detonates. Stars climb into the thousands. 10,000 within weeks. Developers from Kenya, Brazil, Poland send messages about launching their first polished interfaces. Agencies integrate Bootstrap into workflows overnight. Students use it to build their first portfolios. A framework born out of internal chaos becomes the fastest-growing open-source project of the year. And suddenly, Twitter faces a new problem. Its internal experiment now powers thousands of projects outside its walls. The world wants Bootstrap. The company isn't prepared to support it. And rivals? They're paying attention. Chapter 4. Bootstrap versus the purists. The meeting starts tense. A designer slams a laptop shut and says, "If everyone uses Bootstrap, every site will look exactly the same." The room freezes. The war has begun. Bootstrap's rise triggers a backlash. Loud, passionate, ideological. And at the center of that pushback stand the design purists. Among them, Ethan Marcotte, the father of responsive design, whose ideas reshape the mobile web. He's not an enemy of Bootstrap, but he represents a worldview that demands nuance, craft, and individuality. To purists, frameworks feel like fast food, predictable, convenient, and dangerously addictive. Then there's Foundation, built by Zurb, Bootstrap's fiercest rival. Zurb pushes a designer-first philosophy. More flexibility, fewer defaults, more room for custom identity. Foundation markets itself as the anti-Bootstrap. Sleeker, more professional, less cookie-cutter. The battle lines form quickly. Bootstrap's strengths, speed, accessibility, consistency, become the exact reasons designers criticize it. The 12-column grid spreads across the web like an architectural signature. You can spot a Bootstrap site instantly. Same margins, same spacing, same rhythm. Critics fire back. It's the web's denim jeans. Everyone wears it, and everyone looks the same. But Bootstrap evolves. In 2013, version 3 arrives. Mobile first, cleaner, sharper. Influenced directly by Marcotte's ideas, Bootstrap embraces responsive design as a core principle instead of a bolt-on feature. It's a turning point, a concession, and a victory. By then, the popularity war is over. Bootstrap dominates. Foundation fades. Yet, the win comes with a cost. Because when one framework rules the web begins to look uniform. And just as Bootstrap reaches the height of its power, a new threat emerges. One that doesn't come from designers, but from JavaScript itself. Chapter 5. Bootstrap takes over the web. 18%. By 2016, Nearly 1 in 5 of the top 1 million websites runs on Bootstrap. That's not adoption. That's domination. That's an empire built from a tool Twitter almost buried. Bootstrap's spread feels unstoppable. Lyft's early site launches with it. Bright and scrappy. NASA's internal dashboards rely on it to keep engineers aligned. The U.S. web design system borrows Bootstrap structure to modernize government portals, once trapped in early 2000s design purgatory. Everywhere you look, startups, agencies, nonprofits, universities, Bootstrap becomes the default. The safe choice. The efficient choice. The obvious choice. For many teams, this is liberation. Startup/development time from 4 months to 1. Saving $80,000 per project becomes normal. Small teams build interfaces once reserved for companies with design departments. A kid in Manila builds a polished e-commerce site alone. A research lab in Denmark ships tools without hiring a designer. Bootstrap turns design from gatekeeper to gateway. But power carries a shadow. And critics like UX researcher David Malouf see it growing. He warns of design monocultures. Ecosystems where everything looks the same because the same patterns dominate every corner of the web. The denim jeans metaphor becomes reality. Practical, durable, ubiquitous, and everywhere. Still, something deeper brews beneath the surface. A shift in the way developers think about interfaces. The rise of a new force, JavaScript-driven UI frameworks, begins to threaten Bootstrap's throne. And when that shift hits full speed, Bootstrap faces the first existential crisis in its history. Chapter 6. Bootstrap at a Crossroads. Fast forward to 2017. Google I/O. A massive crowd stares at a stage dominated not by CSS frameworks, but by JavaScript giants. Reek surges. Angular rebrands. Vue quietly wins hearts. And suddenly the question shifts from, which CSS framework do you use? To, who owns your components? This is the moment Bootstrap realizes the ground beneath it is moving. React's inventor Jordan Walke stands as the symbol of this new era, component-driven, state-driven, logic-driven interfaces, where CSS feels secondary. Evan You, creator of Vue, champions elegance, flexibility, and the idea that UI can be reactive by default. Their philosophies slice cleanly through the web's old structures. Components replace templates. State replaces style sheets. JavaScript eats the interface. Bootstrap struggles. Version 4 drags through years of rewrites. Release dates slip again and again. The community grows restless. Issues pile up. Blog posts dissect Bootstrap's slow decline, and jQuery, once Bootstrap's loyal backbone, becomes dead weight as browsers modernize. The ecosystem shifts. Tailwind rises with utility-first pragmatism. Material design ships with Google's authority. React's UI libraries multiply like wildfire. For the first time, Bootstrap feels old. Then comes the turning point. Bootstrap 5, 2021. jQuery removed. Architecture cleaned. Components modernized. A signal sent to millions of developers. We are not done. Bootstrap adapts. Slowly, carefully, deliberately. But it adapts. And just when the industry prepares for its quiet retirement, Bootstrap does something unexpected. It refuses to die. Chapter 7. Why Bootstrap Still Matters in 2026. The year is 2025. A Fortune 100 company, massive, wealthy, armed with a bespoke React design system, announces something shocking. They're migrating dozens of internal tools back to Bootstrap. Not because they're old-fashioned, because they're drowning. Too many custom components. Too many inconsistencies. Too many engineers reinventing the same button. Bootstrap offers what their custom system failed to deliver. Order, rules, governance. This is Bootstrap's secret weapon. Governance. While the front-end world chases novelty Tailwind's utility classes, MUI's components, endless React libraries, Bootstrap focuses on predictability, version guarantees, accessibility baked into every component, a grid system stable enough to build a skyscraper on. For large organizations, chaos is the enemy. Bootstrap is the antidote. That stability changes lives too. Ask Fatima Al-Rashid, a junior developer in Amman. She joins a tiny startup with no designers, no seniors, no time. She builds the entire MVP alone, using Bootstrap. 6 weeks later, they launch. 20,000 users arrive. Bootstrap didn't give her beauty. It gave her a foundation strong enough to stand on. And the numbers don't lie. Even in 2026, Bootstrap is downloaded 6 million times every week. 6 million. A decade-old framework competing with the newest, loudest, most aggressively marketed tools in tech. But the world is shifting again. A new frontier forms around design systems, native browser features, and AI-generated interfaces. And the next battle won't be fought between CSS frameworks at all. It will be fought over who controls the future of UI itself. Chapter 8. What comes after Bootstrap? Rewind to a conference room in 2022. A design team huddles around a whiteboard covered in arrows, tokens, and color swatches. Not classes, not grids. Tokens. Systems. They're not debating frameworks. They're debating governance. And without realizing it, they're stepping into the world that will challenge everything Bootstrap built. Because the next war isn't about CSS. It's about control. Design systems surge across the industry. Google's Material Design, Salesforce's Lightning, IBM's Carbon, the US web design system tightening federal standards. These aren't frameworks, they're rule books. They dictate spacing, motion, behavior, semantics. They replace the one-size-fits-most philosophy of Bootstrap with deeply tailored ecosystems built for specific empires. At the same time, the browser itself evolves. Una Kravitz champions container queries and cascade layers tools that finally let CSS behave the way designers always wanted. Native styling grows teeth. The browser becomes smarter. The need for huge frameworks starts to thin. And then another force arrives. AI. Not hype, not prototypes, real tools that generate responsive layouts in seconds. Models that translate sketches into components. Systems that refactor CSS based on behavior patterns. For the first time, a machine begins to design the scaffolding of the web. Bootstrap's dominance raises a new question. Not what replaces it, but do we even need a replacement? Because the next era may not belong to a framework at all. It may belong to the platform, or the AI that decides what UI becomes. And the meaning of Bootstrap's story now shifts. Because if frameworks fade, the philosophy beneath them becomes the only thing that matters. Chapter 9. The Invisible Architecture of the Web. From a cramped office on Folsom Street to an internet shaped by millions of anonymous hands, Bootstrap's journey stretches across a decade of chaos, rebellion, and reinvention. What began as an internal survival tool at Twitter quietly expanded into the scaffolding of modern digital life, influencing everything from side project portfolios to government infrastructure, and its fingerprints remain unmistakable today. In 2024, governments around the world, Australia, Canada, India, the United States, accelerate digital transformation by adopting Bootstrap-aligned systems. A benefits portal in Ohio meets accessibility compliance 6 months ahead of schedule because Bootstrap handled the hardest parts. A municipal service in Bangalore goes live without a design team. A vaccination scheduling portal in Illinois stays online during peak demand because its UI never cracks under load. Every second, millions of interactions still depend on its rules forms validated, grids aligned, components assembled into interfaces we barely notice. Quiet structure, invisible discipline, reliable architecture. Yet the future will not favor frameworks alone. AI-generated interfaces, native browser primitives, and large-scale design systems will reshape how teams build. The old battle between CSS and JavaScript looks small compared to the coming competition between human intention and machine-driven synthesis. But beneath that uncertain frontier lives the same timeless question that Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton faced at Twitter in 2010. How do you build order out of chaos? Bootstrap answered that question not through beauty or novelty, but through something far more durable: consistency, clarity, and access for anyone who wanted to build. It didn't just standardize the web, it standardized who gets to participate in it.